So we are in a full swing of a buyer's market, and you may be considering if it's a good time to sell your property or if you should hold out. And today, what we're going to do is break down some reasonings why you should hold. And we're also going to talk about some reasons why you should sell and not hold, and some of the dangers that can come if you decide to hold for too long. So, obviously, there's a lot to consider here when it comes to this buyer's market. And if you're wondering exactly, what's going on with the buyer's market, what is a buyer's market, I have made a video going into extreme detail about what the buyer's market is and what that means for all of us that are in this current housing market that we have not been accustomed to for quite some time. The last market was, I want to say, around the mid. I want to say it shifted the mid to late 2010s or 20 teens, would you call it? So I want to say around 2018, 2019. That was around a time where the buyer's market started to kind of dwindle down a little bit. And then obviously there was some things going on with COVID. That market was really crazy. It was kind of like a blend of us all not knowing what was going on. And then post COVID, that's when the market got really hot. And if you can recall, the interest rates were really low, and properties were flying off the market, and the days on market was really low. You couldn't keep a good property on the market, and there were bidding wars, and the prices were soaring. They were skyrocketing. We were seeing record year highs when it came to property sales. So it was a really great time for people that was, you know, actively selling or buying in the market because everything was pretty stable for everyone. But the issue with that market that we experienced was, if you remember, a lot of the properties at the time were being overvalued. And a lot of properties were selling for prices that was much higher than what they were actually worth. And what that does is that imbalances the market. So obviously, naturally, the market has to recorrect itself. And that's what we're going through now. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know what this will look like. And we do know that buyers markets can get really crazy. And I did notice, I was looking at some of the properties for sale yesterday, and what I noticed is you'll see an extreme tick of foreclosures. I've been seeing a lot of foreclosures. You may be seeing a lot of properties on auction sites. A lot of REO properties, bank owned properties are starting to come up and pop up everywhere. And if you know, like I know, those properties are sometimes favored in these markets because you can get them for extremely low prices. So I seen a property yesterday that sold for like $5,000 that was in really decent condition. So when you have properties available like that, it puts homeowners in a pickle because they want to also sell their property. Like if you're going through a situation, or other homeowners going through a situation where they want to sell their property, now you're competing with bank owned properties and foreclosures and things like that, where banks are very motivated to get a lot of those properties off the books, and they're taking, you know, pennies on the dollars for those properties. So obviously investors are going to be favoring those properties. And then with the money drying up, a lot of investors aren't even in the place to purchase right now at all. So it is really putting the market in a very compromising situation. But what I would like to do first is talk about some of the reasoning why you should sell in this market, regardless of if you know with everything going on, why you should still consider selling. So, some of the reasons that you should consider selling, regardless of what's going on in the market, is if you're going through some of these situations that we're going to discuss here. And one of them is if you're going through financial pressure. So, if your house feels like it's getting too expensive for you to hold on to, whether it's sitting vacant and you're, paying a mortgage on it, you're paying taxes, or you have repairs, or it's just vacant and it's not making you money and it's more so a liability than an asset. Selling could be a way to cut a lot of those costs and ease that burden. And then also, if you have a property that you're living in that you really, it's too much house for you to afford right now. There is a lot of layoffs and downsizing. There is a lot of businesses shutting their doors, closing their doors, shutting down. There's lots of businesses who profit margins have tanked, and the future of those companies are very uncertain. Well, we have to consider that a lot of our workforce is involved with a lot of these businesses. So when we got ourselves into mortgages during the when the economy was on the uptick and we were on the up and up, we got ourselves in these mortgages that were a lot more easier to handle. And now that some of those things have changed and there's so much uncertainty with the future of the economy, a lot of people are finding themselves into situations where they just can't afford their properties anymore. And if you are in a situation where if you hold on to this property and financially it could be detrimental to you and your family, then that is a legit reason to consider selling and not, wait for the market to change, because we have no idea how long this market is going to be like this, with everything going on. Another reason, you should consider selling is if you need to downsize. If you're in a place that's, in a house that's just too big for you, or if it doesn't fit your lifestyle anymore, maybe your children are gone off to college, maybe they're, grown, maybe they're starting their own families, maybe it's just you and your spouse, maybe it's just you now, maybe you experience, a loss in some type of way, and you just don't need the property that you're in anymore. Selling can help you find a home that's much more comfortable and also more manageable for you. So if you're in a situation like that, you definitely should not hold your cards on this. You should do what makes sense to you in your situation right now, because that is what's best for your specific situation. And you should keep that in mind and really consider that when you're thinking about if you should or shouldn't sell right now. Now, also, if you're going through some type of lifestyle change, you may have to move because of a job. You may have changed jobs. You may have lost your job. You may be going through a retirement or just a huge or a big change in your family situation. That is also a legitimate reason to consider, you know, listing your property or selling your property right now and not waiting or holding on in hopes of a turn in the current market. Another important reason why you should sell and not wait is if you're going through some sort of separation. If you and your spouse or your partner or just your family dynamic is changing and your relationship is ending and the house doesn't fit either of you anymore, like all parties involved don't really want to keep the property. You guys kind of want to wash your hands of the property, or even maybe need to allocate the property to get yourselves in a better financial situation and break ties. selling might be the best path for you to make that, even split and just move forward. Also, if you've experienced some type of death in your family or in your intimate relationships or your situation, and you maybe have inherited a house that you just don't care to keep for whatever reason. Maybe the property needs a lot of repairs. Maybe the property is in a location that isn't favorable to you. Maybe you don't live in the area or you don't live in the state. And dealing with that property right now just does not fit your timeline. Selling kit could be a viable option for you to kind of, detach from the situation, regardless of the history of that property. Because I know in those situations, a lot of times it can be very traumatic and hard and a very hard decision to make. Maybe the person who previously owned that property did have an emotional connection to it. Maybe you have an emotional connection to it and you're just trying to find the will and the power to make the right decision for you and your family. But I would say if it's a situation where it just doesn't fit you and it doesn't fit your life, you definitely should consider selling. Now, in all of these situations, if you are not if the property isn't going to change anything about your life, and you'll be fine to just hold on. Like, let's say the property is, you know, we're told that all real estate is assets. And I do believe wholeheartedly that that is the truth. But all of our financial situations are different. So, as much as the asset that real estate can be, if the property isn't performing in a way for you now that you are being able to reap the benefits of that asset, and it's actually become a liability in some type of way, then you should consider selling. But if you have a vision or you have some type of plan for the property, and holding on to it for a few more years won't, make a difference to you and your family, then by all means, holding on to the property until there's more so like a brighter side to all of this for us, and the market isn't so brutal for us right now, and you don't want to deal with all the prices dropping, and people's equity being threatened in any type of way, then you may be able to hold. But if that's not your case and that's not your situation, you definitely should consider selling. Also, if you're going through some type of landlord burnout, maybe you have investment properties that you've purchased and that you've had and held on to, and you're just kind of over the headache that comes with being a landlord. Or maybe you're going through some type of health issue and you can't do some of the things that you used to do as a landlord, and you don't have anyone to come in and replace you right now. But you wouldn't mind cashing out on those properties to take care of medical bills, to continue to be able to support yourself, your lifestyle, and your family. Then cashing out on your properties and moving on could be a possible option for you in that situation. So these are just a few reasons of why you should sell. If you're in one of these, if you fall in one of these categories or one of these boxes, and holding on to your property too long could possibly hurt you, then you should consider. But I do understand, with the uncertainty of the market right now, it causes a lot of us to overthink it. And we could sometimes not like just the not knowing of if we're making the right decision or if we're making the right move, because we all want to get the most out of our properties. None of us wants to settle for less. Why would you? Why should you? But when we're put in these tough situations where we really don't have a choice, we don't know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what we're going to continue to strategize for in this video, and find a way where we can work our hand in this market regardless of what the market is giving us. We still have to be smart. We still have to be strategic in the midst of all of this uncertainty. Now, regardless of your personal situation, there are situations where holding on to your property could be a danger for you. And I want to share a story of one of my clients. And this is a gentleman that I worked with a few years ago. And he inherited a property from his mom. And when I met him, his mom had been deceased for, I want to say, it was an extended period of time. She had been gone for about 10 years or more. So she had passed away quite some time ago. And he inherited three properties. And he was in a situation where he was in distress. His properties were in not the best condition. In fact, he had already sold one of them and he had two of them left. And when we first spoke, I could tell right away that his mind was not in it. He had mentally checked out because what he had experienced with that first property. And what happened was he had been holding on to that property. The property needed a lot of work. I do remember that. It needed a lot of work. And it was some issues going on in the basement. And in that basement, it was soaking wet. It was super wet. And I don't know where this water was coming from. But he had explained to me that he had worked with a professional, I want to say a couple years prior, and he had received a diagnosis to fix. I can't remember exactly what it was that he needed to fix, but it was something, I want to say with the plumbing system or something like that. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but I can't think of it off the top of my head how he explained it to me, but I do remember seeing, you know, that property. And it just wasn't a property that I was personally going to be able to purchase from him. So he had ended up selling that first property to someone else. And he was just telling me about how everything went down. Initially, when he first received that first diagnosis, it was about a $500 fix that they had quoted him. They said, $500 will come in, we'll fix that. Don't worry about it. You don't have to worry. And for whatever reason, he didn't address that problem right away. And he actually waited a few years. And when he received that diagnosis, this is before the basement was wet. The basement wasn't wet at all. But they could see, there would be an issue. In fact, I think, the property was vacant. I believe he had the water shut off, the electricity shut off. I believe he had everything shut off. No one was living there. He wasn't doing anything with it. And because of this, he thought he was in the clear. And he didn't think that he would need to address the problem right away. So he sat on that property for a few years. I don't know why he sat on it. I don't really know what his motivation was. The market was at the time, I'm trying to remember exactly what the market was. It was around 20, I want to say it was around like 2017, maybe somewhere around there. So the market was just kind of doing its own thing, and it wasn't super high, but it wasn't super low. He was just kind of winging it at that time. So he felt safe to sit on it. You know, the property was boarded up. He didn't have to worry about anybody breaking in there or anything like that, because that is some things that, some concerns he had with one of the other properties. I think he had experienced, but with this one, that wasn't the case. But when I spoke with him, by the time he had gotten to me, he was telling me about how he ended up selling that first property. But when he sold it, because of everything that happened, when he went in there one day and the basement was flooded. So something that was going on with that plumbing or whatever, those pipes, something had burst and it flooded the entire basement, and it began to leak, and it began to damage certain things, other things down there. And he received an offer on the property from another investor, but because of all the damage that was done at that point, he ended up having to come out of pocket $5,000 and pay that, contingency to the buyer just to get rid of that property. So instead of profiting off that property, he actually took a loss. And this is some of the dangers that come with holding on to your property too long. There are dangers of holding on to your property and not paying attention to the writing on the wall. And I could tell in his demeanor that that situation really, like, it took him out. It really took him out. And he wanted to do right by his mom because there was some type of emotional connection there for him, just by the simple fact of those were her properties that she owned for many, many years. And even though he personally didn't have a personal attachment to the property or emotional attachment to the property, he had emotional attachment to her. So naturally, that was built in. And I see similar cases often where people just, maybe it wasn't like um, a repair issue. Sometimes it's tax issues, sometimes it's mortgage issues, sometimes it's issues with the city, and there's issues with coding regulations, and there's so many things that comes up. Sometimes properties sit vacant and then the city begins to start assessing violations on properties. So, people are sitting on that property not knowing, there's violations that comes, and then these violations start to build up, taxes start to build up, mortgage issues build up. Like, there's so many things that can build up over time. And now that asset that you have now turns into a detriment to you financially. So there are a lot of dangers of waiting. So regardless of this market that we're in and wanting to hold out, there is still some cautions that we all should take in deciding if we hold on to our properties, in hopes, in an attempt to wait it out until the grass is back greener in the marketplace. So let's go through a couple of those dangers of waiting too long. I just went over a few, but a big one is carrying costs. So if you have a property and you're paying a mortgage on it, you're paying taxes, you're paying insurance, you're paying for utilities, you have upkeep, you have maintenance. Those costs could really eat away at your savings, at your income. And even if you're financially well off, you have to factor those costs in. Because think about it. Let's say your property is worth $100,000, but you're paying carrying costs of $5,000 every year. If you waited out 10 years, you know, because we don't know how long this, you know, market is going to be like this. We don't know how long the economy is going to be like this. We don't know if it's going to get worse. We don't know if it's going to get better. So you may say, "Hey, it's only $5,000 a year that I'm paying. I'm just gonna wait. Okay, I'm just gonna wait it out over 10. Let's say we have to wait this thing out 10 years. That's $50,000 if you're paying 5,000 a year. And you may be looking at it as, oh, I have it, but you have to still factor in that $50,000 is still coming out your profit. So if you could have made $100,000 on your property after 10 years of waiting it out, you're still losing 50% of the possible income that you could have gained if you sell now. And you may say, well, the the home is going to build equity over those years. The home is going to the value of the property is going to go up. And while that may be true, it's still a risk that you're taking. And even in that, you're still losing $50,000 by holding on to it for those 10 years, regardless of if you have it or not. So that's definitely something you should think about. Also, we don't know if the condition may be worse. The condition of your property may worsen just sitting and waiting. And you still have to pay to upkeep and maintenance. So, like the story I told you guys about earlier, deferring repairs, it can pile up over time. And it can lower your home's value because even if the property is appreciating in value as far as the economy goes and what the economy is telling us, you still have to subtract the wear and tear, the repair cost, you know, all of the things that that property is going to need over time of just sitting there. The condition of the property worsening, sitting there year over year. So you have unless your property is already cash flowing positive and those costs are being offset, then holding on to a property where you're paying for anything over time, it could be detrimental to you. It could be a very bad idea. So if you have a property where it's actually performing and it's an asset and it's paying for itself, then you're in a great position. But if that's not the case and you're paying these costs out of your pocket, then you definitely should consider selling, regardless of if you have the money or not. Another danger of waiting is an extended market. We don't know how long these market conditions will be like this. And waiting for a better market is a strategy that some people use, but it also can backfire. If interest rates stay high, if the demand continues to weaken, if the property values continue to drop, these are some things that could come back to bite you on the butt if you wait too long. You may miss an opportunity. Tying up the tying up capital in your home means you're missing out on other investments or lifestyle changes that you may can have. So you can sell your property now. You could receive payment, a payout, and you could, use that money to do other things. Rather it's, you know, pay for the new property that you want to move into, make other investments, or, just things within your family. Maybe you want to send your kids to college. Maybe you want to invest in some more retirement products. Maybe you want to invest in some more insurance products. There's so many things that you can do with the money that comes from the sale versus waiting. So there's a lot of missed opportunity that comes with possibly waiting too long. The emotional stress that comes with waiting and owning a property that's not it's not an asset to you, and it's also a liability. That can weigh that can weigh down on your peace of mind over time. Just having a property that you're responsible for and you have to worry about every day. You're receiving mail regarding taxes, insurance, possible violations, all of these different things that comes with just being a homeowner. It can be extremely stressful if you don't have your ducks in a row. Depreciation. Property values can drop over time, whether it's because of the neighborhood that your property in and changes that go on, wear and tear, or just economy shifts that we cannot predict. We can't predict what's going to happen with the market, with the economy. We don't know. There's so many different factors. I know some of the most experienced investors who've been investing for multiple decades. And even though they know how to maneuver in each market, they don't know how to predict what's to come in a market or how long we'll be in a specific market. So that's something to think about as well. Now, there are also some important things that you're going to want to consider before you sell if you do choose to sell. So, one of the things is you're going to want to look at your personal financial situation. Can you truly afford to wait, or is selling now a smarter financial choice for you? What is your next move? Are you planning to use the funds from the sale to buy another property, or are you going to look to rent this time? Are you going to get an apartment, or are you just looking to purchase a smaller home? What is your ideal timeline? How much time are you willing to wait? How much time do you need? Is this something that you want to do now? Do you have health concerns? Do you currently live in a property where there's like a lot of stairs and maybe now you're finding that your mobility has changed? Like there's so many things to factor in, but you have to sit down and get real with yourself and speak with your family and your loved ones and make a decision to properly plan your next move in a way that's going to be conducive to you. Also, consider the market conditions. Look at the market trends. There is the different demands in your areas, in different areas, and you need to consider yours because what's going on in the city of Dallas, Texas, is going to be very different than what's going on the country in the countryside of Georgia. So you have to look at where your home is and what's going on specifically there. Even though as a whole in the US, we're going through a dip and we're in a buyer's market as a whole, there's still different demands. You may have a condo in Miami. That's going to be very different than the beach house in Pensacola, right? So you need to start looking at market trends and started studying the market in your specific area, in your particular area specifically. This is very, very important because you need to know. Because this also gets a lot of homeowners in trouble thinking that it's a one all be all or that one shoe fits every situation and every property. And that's just not the case. Now, I know with everything that has been said that we discussed today, the main thing that is confusing people, or not even maybe not even confusing people, but have people on the fence whether they need to sell or not. A lot of homeowners and sellers right now are still very stubborn. And a lot of people are willing to take loss because emotionally they don't want to give their property away. And I would never suggest that you do that. But with these foreclosures popping up everywhere and these bank owned properties popping up everywhere and these REO properties and these auction properties and these auction sites and all of these homes that's being the value is being driven down and buyers are able to have their pick of the litter, and they're able to lowball more, and they're able to come in and negotiate and pay what it is that they want to pay, because if you don't take it, they'll just go somewhere else where someone else is willing to take it. And it's kind of a what situation is more desperate. And you may say, I'm not going out like that. I'm not desperate. The house will burn down and sit before I take a loss, or I lose, or I take pennies on the dollar for my home. I understand that. It's very stressful to go from a booming seller's market to now we're instantly thrown into this brutal buyer's market where we're having to adapt and adjust to all of these things. I understand that wholeheartedly, because you know what your property is worth and you know what you want. So there's a lot to consider here. So being an active investor and being an active person that's actively buying and selling in the market, I have learned different strategies over the year to make sure that I am not giving my properties away when I do decide to sell, and regardless of what the market is. I'm not going to give my property away. And you may feel the same way. You may say, hey, the property will sit before I give it away. And what you want to learn how to do and understand is be able to maneuver through any market and get top dollar for your property in any market. And that's what I have done. And that's what I help other homeowners do. It's very important. And with that being said, there are certain things that you can do to make sure and ensure that you get top dollar for your property, regardless of what's going on in the market. So, with that, I've noticed a couple of things that sellers can do and sellers need to do to ensure that they get top dollar. And because I receive so many requests, and I do meet people often, homeowners and sellers, who does choose to just sit on their property and let the property, rot and go to waste, versus taking pennies for it or giving it away. I created a book that teaches homeowners, how to get top dollar for their property in any market. How to get top dollar from their property that needs repairs, that that is outdated, that needs work, because those are the properties that a lot of buyers come in and they think they could just lowball. And I know those days of doing that out of desperation isn't what is best for you all. You guys, your property is an asset. You purchased it, you own it. You want the money that you put into it. You want the money that you're owed. I feel the same way. I went through the same thing. And because of that, I created this book to help homeowners be able to implement simple strategies to be able to get top dollar for their property. And what I'm going to do for the month of June, I'm going to offer that book to my viewers for free. So it's called the Max Profit Method. It's the proven 3-step method to sell your house for what it's really worth and not take pennies on a dollar or give your property away just because of what the market is doing. Now, for the month of June, I'm offering this as a free download. You can download it right now. The link is in the description, so go ahead and do that. If this is something that you believe can help you and this is something that you want to do, I'm going to break it all down for you. Now, I also have other resources available to you in the description. So if you need further assistance, I'm here to help. Go ahead, take a look in the description box, tap in with those resources. And if you want to continue to get insight on market trends, what's going on, some of the changes, also make sure you subscribe to the channel, because that is what we're going to continue to do, cover those topics just to make sure we're all in on the know of what's going on in our economy, and we're standing and we're making sure that our finances is intact, our assets is intact, and that we're doing the right thing to ensure that we are proactively doing right by our families and ourselves by making sure we keep the money in our pockets versus giving our equity away to buyers or investors or whoever because of what the market is doing. So, thank you so much for watching this video. I enjoyed having this conversation with you today. Until the next one, be good, be great. Peace.